Hi everyone, welcome to the couch. Happy Friday, and
Happy
this
Friday.
is Commissioner Wilson's virtual office hours.
Yay! Thank you, Lee. Hi, everybody. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. It's kind of a rainy day, but it was so nice out today.
Well, I was going to say, we're a little sweaty mess. I don't know if you can tell from your angle, but we went out to do some site visit with our utilities department today, and it was humid, but I'm glad it wasn't super sunny because we had to wear hard hats and safety vests, but it was really, really exciting.
It was really nice to be outside and to just kind of see some other people from different departments, because there's over 8,000 people that work for the county.
And I am so grateful. When I first came into office in the throes of this pandemic, when everyone was still, obviously being extraordinarily careful and cautious, and we were only really having certain essential people come into the office, I was worried that this is how the whole term was going to look. So it's been really great to put names and faces in all of our departments, in our utilities department, in the work they're doing in water and water reclamation. To me is really the most hopeful and important work that I've seen in my lifetime. It's incredible. And I think it's something that if there's a way for us to be able to answer any questions you have about what happens to your water after you flush, or what happens when you flip your water on in the morning, because those things, they feel very seamless, and it's looks invisible, and it's not. There's a lot that goes into that.
Well, I was going to save that for the end, but since we already dove right in there,
the reason why I'm a little bit
since we already dove into the water, I would love to talk about it because it's really, I feel like it's one of those things that everybody takes for granted.
Yes.
Especially being in a country where we have the privilege
of
just turning on the tap.
Yeah. We're in a county that there's been investment along the way to make sure that the infrastructure that's in place is doing what it's supposed to be doing, which is delivering safe drinking water, and the level of redundancies in the safety and the level of service. Sometimes if these really brilliant people are doing their job the way they are doing it, you don't know, because if there's not an emergency, you never really talk about water, right? We spend a lot of time talking about the places where there's water problems. And so I think it's a really good thing to highlight it when, a group of people can really get it right. And I really believe Orange County's utilities in the work that they do, specifically in the water reclamation and the water, in our water services. And I think understanding the challenges of the future and looking at population growth and hearing them talk about solutions and long-term and sustainability, it just gave me a sense of hope that I kind of needed after doing some of the other research on other places and their big water troubles. Yeah,
it definitely made me think of how much we should invest in STEM education, because all of those people that we met today, I could tell were all brilliant. And the fact that walking around these facilities that were state of the art, very innovative, and I kept thinking this came out of someone's mind.
And it was all chemistry, right? For all the times that I was like, when am I ever going to use this again? They literally use it every day. We send our wastewater into a water plant reclamation center, and then it goes through these processes that are very much part of organic chemistry and comes out the other end clean enough to be used. We use it only right now in irrigation, but really technically it can be used for almost everything that we use water for. It comes out that clean. And if we are really thinking about what the future is going to look like, that technology for how we recycle water is what's going to keep us alive. Because we will eventually, run through that groundwater, and without having the kind of natural filtration that we are always feeling very concerned about losing, the question keeps coming up: how are we going to have drinking water? And if you look at the way that the technology has gotten better and better and better for how we're treating our wastewater, it gives me great hope.
Yeah, so there were two constituent kind of concerns that were brought up. One was people that live near these reclamation sites that have well water. What would that do to their wells?
Well, it was actually the question that came up, and I've had this question with I think some of my friends in the Avalon area and in some of the areas where there's primarily wells, but that there are actually municipal wells, which is what we have out there, whether or not the digging a separate well would affect them.
Yeah.
And you're talking about a 900-foot difference. So that was resolved. and also understanding the level of monitoring that goes into the water that comes up through the municipal well system and is pumped before it ever reaches anybody's tap. And so seeing, literally seeing on the board how they analyze all that in real time and what they do should there be a problem.
Yes.
What the backup plan is to that it makes it very seamless on the other side. If there is a storm, if there's a power outage, if there's a failure of some kind, there's redundancies and, there was generators that could really keep small towns powered for some time. But if you think about the amount of water that's delivered throughout the county, that's life-sustaining, and that includes hospitals, and that includes, our schools, and that includes other institutions, as well as our residences.
Yeah, so you can sleep better knowing that
it's amazing.
These locations are looking 30 years ahead.
We're going to be back out there actually because this is not up and running. It's right now they're continuing to run the tests on the municipal well, and they're really still building their water reclamation area. So we're going to be back out there, and we'll let you know when that is, and keep you updated on the ongoing process of getting that up and running for West Orange County.
And for all of you new viewers today, so every single week we do these virtual office hours, so Commissioner Wilson can answer your questions. So feel free to drop them in the chat box, or you can email them in advance to district1@ocfl.net.
Yes, and if you have any questions about things from other departments that we either visited or we're talking about, let us know. We'll get you connected. We'll find out. I get to learn along the way from you all also, which is exciting. And to me, I'm never really going to understand that chemistry as well as the experts that are there, but they do a great job of explaining it to me in a way that I hope that we can try to relate. So we'll just keep showing off the good things and giving you warnings about the bad.
Absolutely. Alrighty, well, so you had a pretty busy week, 2 weeks.
This was, and for
feels like a year.
It feels like a year. This was very busy, but the Tuesday meeting, I did try to check in for a few minutes after to give you some updates about the many agenda items that drew attention.
Yeah.
There were some that I never even got to in my other post, but it was a very, very full and important day. A lot of public participation.
Yes.
If you weren't able to make it, that's okay too, because I felt like there were enough. We really went through the emails. We went through even the comments I got on social media. I know we have an auto response to social media that sometimes we can't get back to you right then, but just know we are seeing anything that comes in that way, and we just want to make sure that if it's something that we can get you into the system to help you in a different department or something in a more official capacity, that we're getting you into the right system. So always email us here at the office at the district1@ocfl.net, and which reminds me of our emergency services. I'm getting out of order, aren't I?
No, I'm very fluid. I mean, these are your hours, so. But yeah, absolutely. And, something that I think is really great that this week taught me that made me feel so grateful to live in America was that democracy works, and people came out and made their voices heard.
Yes. And they were listened to.
Yes.
It was I visualized that coming into office and was really fearful about not being able to see it because we were under precautionary measures and in the chambers. And this week was really the week that it looked like I expected or I was hopeful of, because that dialogue and hearing people, whether I agree with you or not, hearing from you tells me that we're doing something right. That democracy is working.
Yeah.
So I really appreciated all of the dialogue.
Yeah. Well, one thing that you didn't get to cover during your kind of one-on-one on Facebook Live. So impact fees right now really feel like a point of contention from the state level all the way down to here. It feels like this discussion of impact fees, for those of you that don't really understand what they are or why they're important, doesn't it feel as though there's a little bit of like stress around that conversation? Tug of war.
Yeah, but it shouldn't be. It's a very fundamental, basic concept when you think of there's a lot of things out there in taxation that I think are really complex, and I'm not a tax specialist, but there are some that I think feel very straightforward, and impact fees are one of those where development, whether it be a warehouse that's being built or a hospital that's being built or a school that's being built,
apartment complex,
or homes, anything that comes as a development obviously is going to impact us. And I mean, you know, from our roadways to what kind of emergency services we need, everything in between. Impact fees are a way to make sure that we're offsetting those costs so that existing residents aren't paying the brunt of the growth issues, right? So we're not paying for the development pays its way. And so impact fees are literally what they sound like. You're paying for the impact of your development. And so locally, we have been historically been able to adjust those impact fees to make sure that we're keeping up with development and infrastructure. And what happened this year was that because impact fees had been historically low for so long, that when adjustments looked like they were being made across the board, we were preempted by the state legislature to cap them. And so that affects what we're paying, what our schools are getting, that affects what our fire and police. So, you got to love the guys up in Tallahassee that act like they're really on the side of our first responders and that really love our teachers, but then turn around and vote to cap our impact fees. That's how you get paid. If you're a teacher in Orange County, if you're if you're a firefighter or a policeman, a sheriff's deputy, if you work in any of those, you need to make sure you're voting for people who did not vote to cap these impact fees. The bill was largely pushed by the Builders Association of Florida as something to help them keep their costs low. I understand their need and their interest in keeping their costs low, but ultimately they're not going to have a client base if we can't provide the infrastructure needed to go along with their development. So it's a very short-sighted on the part of the I believe the building community and the development community to not understand how valuable those impact fees can be in order to really create the product that they want, right? Yeah. So they're creating a product in their development. If we don't have enough to pay for the roads and the light and the schools, that product's worthless. Yeah. So, it's tough to explain from this position to the people in Tallahassee, but it was, very heavily lobbied in a year that open advocacy was really quieted because they had restricted the ability of advocates to come in and kind of balance those messages to lawmakers. So that's why we've seen the worst of the worst out of Tallahassee this year.
Yeah, and it feels like to me like a sponge, actually more like a straw of resources, right? Because if you are capping impact fees, then that means all of the additional general revenue that would have gone into other things, right, like maybe the Green Place program or conservation.
Parks and Rec for all the people out there.
That's all going to be even further pushed down the totem pole.
Right, because we have to take care of needs first.
And then, so you said that that they're going to basically develop into a market that's not going to be able to afford their products at a certain point, right? And that means that the middle class,
it's not going to be an appealing product. Who wants to move into a place where the schools are crappy and the roads are crappy? Nobody wants that product, right? So it's just even when you think about the full package, it's like, we want the same things at the end of the day. When you think about what that community, the development and building community, I'm assuming that they want the same things. They want a community that is livable, that is successful, that has a high quality of life. Well, that's what impact fees allow us to get without forcing it on the existing residents, without taking away from existing residents what would be an investment in their parks or a reinvestment in their own infrastructure. So yeah, that's exactly right.
That's sad because the environment gets pushed even further down. Like I feel like the environment's at the very, very bottom because there's no profit.
There is a false narrative out there about that if you somehow there is if you ask the development community and builders to pay the part they're supposed to pay for that impact, that somehow that is why we don't have affordable housing and so don't go for that. It's a priority. It should always be a priority. I can't imagine why you would ever have to choose between, healthy, affordable housing, a road that keeps you alive, that has a working light, and clean air. Those are things that should all be able to be mutual, in existence at the same time without being a choice.
I just relate it to any type of like factory farming, for example. It's almost like they're trying to keep their costs so low that they're trying to optimize the turning out the production of homes to the point where it's going to break the rest of the quality of life for all of us, basically.
Exactly.
It's really sad.
It is sad.
Well, thank you for breaking that down. The next thing that was spoken about was Brightline.
Brightline came and did an update for us. Brightline, of course, is the high-speed rail. It's a private entity that is investing in Florida right now to build a line from Miami, South Florida, all the way up to Orlando, and then from Orlando all the way out to Tampa. And I know we're so excited about it because the idea of mass transit, first of all, it's so overdue. I think Floridians voted the first time, as an amendment to try to get a high-speed rail how many years ago now? And have lost so many opportunities. And this is really the one that should stick because it is a private entity. I say that, but then, if you came to the BCC meeting, you heard the type of criticism that they're getting is, to some extent, I think, misplaced. There are business entities in the International Drive area and, of course, our convention center here in Orange County that really want to have mass transit. They really want to be part of an easy transportation system between the airport and the iDrive corridor. I think those are all valid needs and valid concerns, but I don't think Brightline is the place to look for it. And I think what we're seeing from that community is a all or nothing approach, where if you're not going to stop at the convention center, then we're going to do what we can to kill this project. And to me, that has gotten us to this point. We've had many other opportunities to get high-speed rail and squandered them because they weren't stopping by the convention center. And listen, I think this is analogous to asking Delta to fly into the convention center. It doesn't have anything to do with our inner city, what we're doing inside this community. That type of transit is on us. And I have said before, whether it's commuter rail, elevated rail, light rail, whatever it is, it's not high-speed rail. High-speed rail takes us to Tampa, to Miami, hopefully someday to Jacksonville. Yeah, exactly. Brightline is the Delta or the, Southwest Airlines. We're not talking about the local solution. And so they've been really upfront about wanting to partner in actually providing some of the locations for the next part of this, which would be our job, right? That local connection, those commuter lines. And I get the sense from a lot of people in the community that they still don't understand that what a gift that would be to have a private entity, a private industry provide some resources in either transportation hubs or transportation lines where we could share lines for some of the regional transit. They're very interested in doing this. And yet the pushback they get is, well, what about getting to the convention center? I'm like, you're still not getting this.
Yeah, no, but it gave, at least that pushback gave them the opportunity to explain that they need at least 1,000 feet to be able to slow down enough to make a stop like that.
If you've ever been on the Eurorail, you'll know. This is a bullet train.
This is fast. Not like a cute little, let's stop and get
This is not the monorail. This is.
Then the second thing that they brought up was that there's nothing stopping Orange County from creating that interlinking, rail from, the airport
and we have
to iDrive.
We have the availability of, there's a hub that's already been located there. There's clearly the will of the commerce in that area, but it's going to need to take the investment, right? So we've got the TDT investment, we've got the CRA investment. It needs to be us. The transportation tax or infrastructure tax may come back. There's going to be, I believe, some federal funds coming in specifically for mass transit. We need to capitalize on all those right now and get this done while we have the chance to partner with a private entity and potentially get some, really some bang for our buck as taxpayers. So, my response to anybody I can talk to about this that says, well, they should be stopping at the convention center is, if we are bringing people in on high-speed rail, from Miami and from Tampa and the other way around, our convention center, our hotels, our restaurants will receive the benefit from that. We will continue to increase our tax base and our revenue and visits. If we kill another rail project, we won't. Simple.
Yeah. You're doing yourself a disservice if you're advocating against something. But I think to them, they think like, oh, well, the squeaky wheel gets the oil, so I'm going to squeak as loud as I can.
Or we're going to continue to threaten. Now, I will say that the only group for me that has raised concerns enough to really be very vocal, and I believe, I'll continue to try to make sure that they're getting heard, are the residents in the Hunters Creek area. They're in the most viable path. And there's a transportation corridor as part of the 417 that, is what is being discussed. And I really believe the residents of Hunters Creek should be the ones creating the squeaky. Those are the squeaky wheel. That being said, because Brightline is a private entity, I think they're in a great position to find some really great solutions for the people in Hunters Creek. Hunters Creek residents aren't being unreasonable. They're worried about noise, they're worried about dust and dirt, and they're worried about other environmental impacts. These are things that if they were able to sit down and really come up with, the knock list of here's what it will take to have us in support, I think they can do it, knowing they've used some amazing technology to get as far up here as they have. I don't know if you've seen any of the videos online about what they've done over near the Space Coast to get under the highway, but they've the technology that's there can really, really provide some of those solutions as long as they're willing to sit down with the people in Hunters Creek. So hopefully that'll happen.
Yeah, and never forget that Brightline is a private company.
It's a private company.
So, but you brought up that there'll probably be some federal funding that'll be unlocked. So the American Rescue Plan, you got a briefing on that
Yeah,
as
we
well.
talked about the American Rescue Plan on Tuesday. It was a really important conversation because when federal dollars come to the local government, there's usually very specific guidelines, and the Treasury actually gives narrow requirements for the ways that the buckets of money can be used. So when we got the CARES money back at the beginning of the pandemic, or I shouldn't say the beginning, now it feels like the beginning from this angle, but really it was when we were feeling some of the most difficult economic punches here. There was, it was spend it now. Make sure that you're getting this into your community, rental assistance, small business assistance, individual assistance, health services. So we were getting it into testing and to PPE and to all those type of things. There will continue to be funds in the second part of this, in the American Rescue Plan, for the ongoing care of residents in that capacity. Testing will continue at Barnett Park. COVID vaccines will continue through the county to some extent, not as widespread because really we just don't have as much of a demand right now to get those vaccines, but we'll continue to have funding for that. But there was also buckets of money that will be earmarked and specifically tailored for certain things that the county government needs.
Yeah.
And when we went into lockdown, the county had certain projects that were in the works, and some of them were funded partially, some of them were funded fully, and some of them were in the plans but not funded at all, but need to still happen. So one of the avenues of use for the American Rescue Plan is actually to go back and fill that revenue that was displaced by the use during the pandemic.
Yeah.
So there were certain projects that were in place for emergency services, for various other departments replacing things in our public works, a lot of stuff in the infrastructure realm that will have a chance to really be able to get started again and move forward with funding because it's a replacement of revenue that was lost.
Yeah.
So that's a really exciting part of the budget discussion. There's a huge chunk that will go into social services. We're going to hopefully be able to really hone in on helping some people that have not had the opportunity to get those resources in the first round. There's going to be specific guidance this time for how to help nonprofits that were stretched thin. Mm-hmm. There's going to be specific guidance again for small businesses. So we're really going to be able to see hopefully a boost here in the next 6 months in some of those areas.
That's very good, because Central Florida Foundation did a study, and apparently over 20% of the nonprofits have either completely changed their model or failed altogether due to COVID.
And we know from the work that that goes on in District 1, that the heavy lift out there in the community, feeding, clothing, bathing, getting medicine for people during COVID was done by Matthew's Hope, who didn't have a government grant, but they should be eligible for some of this revenue recovery.
Yes.
Because it isn't the same type of grant program where they have to kind of check the boxes of who and what they're going through. It's really a recovery of what they've already expended getting through COVID and being out there on the front line. So I'm very hopeful that we'll be able to get some of that for the nonprofits that were really boots on the ground. Government can't do it. Shouldn't do it. I believe in that public-private partnership.
Yeah.
And we're very grateful for that public-private partnership. When it works, it's such a good thing because there are people out there that just know how to do it better.
Yeah.
But making sure we're taking care of those entities is part of our responsibility.
Yeah, government can't do everything, so they rely very heavily on their partners in the community.
Exactly.
One thing you did say, and you asked a question specifically about, which is something constituents have been emailing us a lot about, which is the CIP for the animal shelter, the new one that's been in talks for years now.
Yes, it was proposed and approved several years ago. And I was told at some point that the pause button was hit on it because of COVID. I'm not going to totally call BS on that, but I kind of want to because it looked like there was some slowdown on it before COVID. I don't really know.
Well, I mean, I think the reason why you might feel that is because we did get a really in-depth briefing about the overall county budget where we saw trends through previous years, and we were definitely hit, but it didn't look so substantial to the point where a project that's been in the works for so long would have been.
Right. And I think that the issue probably also comes down to that there are some projects that because of the start to finish needs of that project are a little different, right? So how does it look to completely rebuild the animal shelter? It needs to happen.
Yes.
It needs to happen. I did bring it up on Tuesday because it is under the guidance from the Treasury and an appropriate use of some of that recovery, right? So if those projects that are essential to Orange County's services were displaced, then there's an opportunity to recover those. So that's going to be something that we'll bring back up in budget workshops, and we'll continue to be the squeaky wheel for our shelter. If you were one of the many, many awesome people that had some input about making sure we were transitioning to the humane retail model, stay plugged in. We're going to need you to speak up for this shelter. I do think that public pressure is going to be part of I really think it's going to be part of what will push it over the line and get it kind of bumped up in the project list. It shouldn't go back to the back of the line, knowing that it was already needed back in 2017 or 2018.
Yeah.
So we'll keep making that. I really want to make sure that when this happens, there's just going to be another opportunity now that we don't have the puppy mill outlets. The puppy mill outlets are going to be gone from Orange County. So there's going to be a real opportunity, I think, to really invite people in who are interested in adding a pet to their family and making it a much better experience for people who want to come and volunteer, and of course making it a much more comfortable place for the pets that are there, the animals that are there. And I know that our community has the biggest heart and has the best of intentions in its advocacy. I just want to make sure that we're really focusing those energies where we can get the most good and the most animal lives touched. And I think the way to do that is to provide, this encouragement and pressure to get this new shelter built as quickly as possible.
I know you probably covered a lot of this during your one-on-one on your Facebook Live, but we did get a bunch of questions of people saying, like, how is it not a unanimous vote? Like, who would vote no and why? And I think, I actually did learn a lot about, some of the other perspectives in terms of like how this could impact some of the smaller mom and pops. But on the other
You're
side,
talking about the humane.
Yeah, about the retail pet store ban. A lot of people reached out to us on social media and through email just asking like who voted yes, who voted no, and why would anybody even vote no. I think that there's a lot of misconceptions still about unless you sat through all of the comments, which you could learn a lot by doing that, because there were so many perspectives there.
There were a lot of perspectives there. I default to data and research and numbers and looking at other areas where they have tried and they have, really experienced things that we maybe haven't experienced yet here.
Or already passed
or already passed there, or also, and I thought it was fascinating to see the research that came from actually even our Ashley Moody here in the state of Florida, prosecutors who have looked into this. And so at the end of the day, what we know is that the retail pet market here in Orlando was undeniably using, as part of their inventory, stock from puppy mills all over the country. We don't necessarily have the large-scale commercial breeder puppy mill activity here in Orange County. I think there are some small-scale
in the backyard,
that are a problem. I think some of them do a really good job. I think some are a problem, but the larger, sort of unregistered, really illegal mills are in the Midwest, and they're imported. And so what happens is the retailers here can make the most money by buying low and selling high. It's a business, and it made me very sad to hear from the people who were losing their jobs or felt like they were losing their jobs because they were told by their employer that if they lost the ability to sell pets, that they would have to close their doors. I thought it was really helpful to hear from people who had the humane model of retail. Gracie's Food from Winter Garden was there, and Wolfgang Bakery was there, and said, look, we're very successful without selling pets. They have services, they have food, they have treats and boutique items. A lot of times they can hold classes for their trainings, and there's all kinds of different ways for people in that space to make money and have a retail center, a retail outlet that works without having the buy low, sell high pets. That is what they were doing. And we got, some reports, up until Tuesday that really identified the puppy mills that were of the greatest concern nationally were some of the ones that were selling here, really pushing here, or I should say shipping. They were shipping.
Yeah. Because out of the 10,000 mills that the federal government knows about, there's only like 19% that are technically audited and actually doing it responsibly. So that designation could really be way more lenient, you were saying. Than,
they don't have enough supervision. So the USDA, right. So the supervising everyone, that I think that everyone who heard the arguments that were made that day or the discussion, there was a lot of interest in this idea, well, this is already being taken care of by oversight by the USDA or Orange County Animal Services.
Yeah.
And if you are a volunteer or just a person who's ever visited Orange County Animal Services, you know that they are stretched very thin, that those are paid for, those individuals work, with tax dollars, and they are really doing the work of 20 people each. So no, they aren't a policing body. They are not a policing body. Now they do have the responsibility when there's a confiscation to engage in a due process operation, and they do have inspectors, but it can't be the singular oversight of what has been a traditionally very abusive industry. And so federally, we have the USDA, which is what those commercial breeding operations go under. And, I think what was the number of inspectors per commercial breeding operations it was so low that they didn't really ever get to monitor what was going on in these operations. And so that's why, you're continuing to see the ability of that inventory of pets, of sick, really, really sick pets coming into municipalities that are still allowing them to be sold. So,
and you'll know the difference when you work with a professional breeder.
That's right.
You will see, they will vet you more than they'll vet.
I loved hearing from that breeder.
Yes.
She was great. There was a breeder that came to speak that day that said, I am not going to sell as a professional breeder to someone who is not serious about taking good care of and being a good steward of this life that I brought into this world.
Yes.
And she also bred police dogs and had a strong sense of ownership over the health and well-being of the breed that she cares for. So, even though I have never purchased from a breeder, I know the breeders were very much concerned about what was going on in these retail pet stores.
Now, one quick question. Do you think the next step is to try to find ways to restrict the backyard breeding or find a way? Because I know that there's a lot of confiscations that's been happening. I don't know if that's even something we could do.
I think you have to be really careful because, and we've talked before about the problem that the American legal system sets us up.
Yes.
As animal advocates, we have such limited ability, and it's really going to have to be turned over completely because they're property.
Yeah.
So by the constitutional definition of property, in order to take someone's pet away from them, the standard has to be really high. And so that's where the problem lies. And until we're able to prove the case that they are sentient, which we know that they are sentient and really deserve their own rights as such, and should be allowed to be victims in their own right.
Yes.
Not you being a victim of someone because of the pet.
Of the pet, yeah.
We're going to face this because it's a property law issue. So for those of you that are interested in a little bit in learning about the Non-Human Rights Project, it's actually all about these legal cases that tried very much to argue that because this is a life, that those full scale of property rights that you get, the bundle of rights that you get as an individual should apply.
Yes.
And there's been some advancement and there's been some big steps backward. So it's a long game to try to make sure, because the way that we play sort of whack-a-mole with animal welfare cases and animal abuse laws it's not sufficient.
No. I always learn so much about rights with you, and so I think the next biggest thing that people emailed a lot about was the picketing ordinance.
Yes.
And I'd love to hear your take. I know that you kind of dove into it a little bit, but...
Yeah, I think it was such an important, interesting discussion item that came up. Actually, it wasn't a discussion item, it was an ordinance.
Yeah.
Usually the way we see ordinances is we have, it comes up as a discussion item, then we have 2 work sessions, then we have a public hearing, and then we go to vote. And this one was like, hey, here's an ordinance, you ready to vote? And everyone was like,
wait, what?
Say what?
Everybody said that, though. It was like almost like a unanimous...
Yes, because at first I was like, maybe it's because I'm the newest one. Maybe they talked about this,
years ago,
before in the fall, before I got here. So this was a picketing ordinance that basically allowed for a buffer around a targeted person's domicile, their home. And I just want to be really clear about something. A picketing ordinance is a protest ordinance. So when you read the language, they actually define, the protest or the type of picketing, which includes things like saying disparaging comments, holding up a sign. Like it describes in detail what protests look like. Peaceful protests.
Yeah.
And so when it came up a couple weeks ago, the entire just about commission, except for I think 2 and the mayor, were very concerned that the public didn't have an opportunity to weigh in, very concerned about what the implications would be for First Amendment right to free speech and right to assembly. And I had very specific questions and concerns about whether this was a unneeded law, knowing that we have so many on the books already, and that oftentimes those layers and layers and layers of laws criminalize things to the point of being able to be used against people for no good reason other than they were already a target. And let me just give you an example. I know that sounds like a really strange way to describe it. And for those of you who are familiar, it's the idea of a pretextual detainment or a pretextual stop, or the idea that if there's a bad actor in law enforcement, that they see somebody coming down the street doing something that they think they don't like, that they will, basically have another opportunity to apply that law to them, whether it's something that the intent of the law was out there for. So in our really awful past as a country, those type of pretextual ordinances were put in place very specifically in Jim Crow era to keep people in their places and to keep people down and to keep people from, and to criminalize to the point of being able to incarcerate at the levels that we've seen today, right? So we criminalize things that really shouldn't have been criminalized, and so we watch our incarceration rates go up. And looking into the buffer laws, and the more research that I did on these buffer laws, overwhelmingly the evidence is that the application of them was disproportionately applied, that there were oftentimes arrests made but not taken all the way through to conviction, so they were dropped, which is why I think they've stayed on the books. So I think the reason why they haven't been deemed unconstitutional, because you're on a public sidewalk, so really I don't know how that's constitutional, is this idea that if we charge you with it and we get you off the street right then, but we don't take it all the way through trial, it's never going to be struck down as a bad law, as an unconstitutional law. And so the interesting thing for me was that hearing from actually someone who came to speak, that's why some of the ones here locally that have stayed on the books, they rarely go all the way through to trial. So they haven't really been challenged. Now, I will tell you, I understand the need to keep people safe in their homes. I understand the need to make sure that we have order. I'm very aware that there's a time and a place and a manner for protests. But I think we've got to be really cautious about the way that we word it, the way that we approach it. And I think that when we talk about open public spaces, those are the most protected. A sidewalk is the most protected for political speech. So, we heard from some people with the union that were really concerned because right now there are so many home businesses that this law would make illegal if they were to go literally picket as a union, a small union.
In a residential area.
Right.
Absolutely. And I know that it got to a place where they were trying to explain the actual need, that this is a gap, that there's a gap that this is filling, and you were still kind of confused last time.
No, because it's interesting because
you were like, what, where, why?
Yeah,
how?
So if I set foot on your property with a sign or yelling or whatever was identified in this ordinance, that's trespass. You can have me arrested. Yeah. If I throw something, that's aggravated trespass. You can have me arrested if I stop your car, that you can arrest. All those things have really been thought of, and in an HOA, they're their own private entity. So even that was thought of. So one of the examples the sheriff gave was the idea of after, and I found this a little bit. I found this a little bit troubling, that the examples that the sheriff gave, I felt like were trying to paint a picture of places where the language or protesters were very unsavory, right? The unpopular protest, or neo-Nazis, or Westboro Baptist when they came after Pulse. And, I understand that. I don't like the idea of there being that type of protester anywhere near my town, but there's still First Amendment rights, and we can't chip away at those, because that's us also. If we take them from this group, then we lose them over here. And so I didn't love that argument, and actually was a little offended by it. But even more importantly, it didn't identify that there's already protections on the book for funerals. There's already protections there are so many laws that really already cover this issue if there's really a concern for the safety of the residents. So, it was a non-starter. My fear is it's going to come back up, because I think that there was never a no vote. So what I had said at the end, if you could hear the mics, on, it was, are we voting? Are we voting? And the county attorney said, no, we don't have to vote. It just dies or whatever. But I would have liked to have seen a vote on it, because that goes on the record.
Yeah.
And so because it was tabled, it doesn't mean that it's gone.
Yeah. Well, something that was tabled for now the Liberty University conversation that you had on your Facebook Live. I know some people had questions that you wanted to clarify.
Yeah, so our consent agenda, if you look at our great big agenda, it's ridiculous, but the first part of it is usually the consent agenda portion, filled with things that have gone through a process and then now are sort of brought up in a batch item, a consent agenda, and voted, and then it just goes into place. And so a lot of times it's renewals of contracts, provider renewals, like those types of things. Sometimes it's reappointments to boards or professional boards. And we have an opportunity as commissioners to look through the agenda, obviously the week we get it, the Wednesday to Friday. If by Friday afternoon there's something in the consent agenda portion of it that we find that we need to talk about or would like to use as a discussion item, it can be pulled by that Friday. Lo and behold, there was an item Hannah and I talked about. We have an amazing staff member who likes to get into the details of all these agenda items, and it was a really, really important one to look at, and it was affiliation with Liberty University as Orange County as an experiential learning partner, and it was a partnership and an affiliation. I love the idea of us affiliating with learning experiences from universities all over the world. I know we do it. We have plenty of opportunities. My concern was that particular private entity, that private partnership was with a university that still codifies discrimination in their code of conduct against the LGBTQ plus members of their student body. Mm-hmm. You can literally be financially penalized if you're a student there for being gay. And, that's not an affiliation that I think is an appropriate one for Orange County, or, I really think as fundamentally having any affiliation with a discriminatory institution is horrible. Mm-hmm. And so I was very concerned, looked it up. Yes, this is it was an online learning experience, but it doesn't matter. It was the same university. Wanted to see if, maybe some of their policies had changed since my understanding of the civil rights cases against them in the past. And not only had they not changed, but as recently as 2015, they asked permission to be able to get around Title IX anti-discrimination laws, and were denied that permission because they wanted to fine women on their campus that sought abortion. So they were fining their gay students. They were, fining women who were making decisions for their own bodies, and this was an affiliation that students potentially could see that we had that I think would be misleading about our position and what we find to be fundamentally right and fair and where we fall on discrimination. Yeah. So I did raise the issue with the administration as a consent agenda item that needed to be pulled for discussion. They opted not to discuss it at that meeting. It may come up at another meeting. We'll let you know. I don't mind a discussion about it. I really sort of got into some deeper research about what that university's platforms and positions have been and the way they've treated their students. There's actually a large class action case out of that several of the plaintiffs are students or former students of that university who were subjected to conversion therapy under the pretenses of student counseling and were damaged, harmed, injured from it. So, I'm going to continue to keep an eye on those type of cases. And if you are discriminating against the LGBTQ plus community, I don't want to have anything to do with you.
Yeah.
We aren't gonna partner with that. And I would continue to fight that fight for as long as I need to.
Well, I mean, you see what's going on at the state. Like, sometimes it makes me feel like, what year are we living in? But you saw that DeSantis is basically trying to force public schools to have their teachers and students, say what religion that they are so that they can apply for funding and actually qualify for funding.
It is.
They have to take this survey.
And it's so antithetical to what our founding fathers, they were very fearful of that, of the church and state. That needed to be a separate and clear divide because they knew that it could be a position of tyranny, and they were the original the original discrimination suit was the idea that we weren't going to be told by the Church of England what we had to do. So it's crazy that after all these years that this is even a conversation. The separation of church and state is a thing. It's a constitutional thing. If you believe in the First Amendment or the Second Amendment, you should be fighting also to make sure that our tax dollars aren't going into religious organizations. And, you know, if they are, for heaven's sakes, that there's no discrimination on the books, that they we have voucher dollars right now in the state of Florida that go into schools where they fire gay teachers. So
it's like, what year are we in? You know,
I know, but I just want you all to know, not me, not here. And I'm sorry, I am okay with a discussion about, you know, the need for choices in schools. I am really open to a discussion about the wide variety, and I love really the wide variety of religious denominations and religious cultures we have. I just don't think there's any place in that for discrimination on any level for any reason.
Yeah.
And so that is
especially when it touches public funding. Like, to me, that just doesn't make any sense. No. But since, you know, we're talking about that, what year we live in regarding like local policy or what have you, something that I get excited about when it comes to innovation, we toured the emergency management department, and it's just like the parallel to me, because they are so far ahead.
Okay, hurricane season is coming and they want you to be ready.
They're ready.
They're ready. I'm
ready.
So impressed. It made me, you should sleep well at night. I mean, don't get me wrong. You need to be prepared for all disasters and make sure that you're registering on the Orange County. It's ocfl.net, and look for storm. Or if you want to go in and actually even just to the regular Orange County website and kind of do the drop down tab to find, they will send out alerts and information about where there are sandbag pickup and where there are power outages, where there may be a force main issue. It is, to me, it is the nerve center of the county for emergency preparedness and preparation. I was really impressed.
Yeah, me too. And the team themselves, they seem like they came from backgrounds where they all had this different layers of expertise that could work so collaboratively together. They do like trainings together. They do like, you know,
a lot
drills.
Of energy. There's a lot of energy there, really, and a lot of energy and a lot of passion for the community. I think a lot of what I could feel is that they understand that we are sometimes at our best and worst times in a disaster.
Yeah. And
so they're the navigator of the best and a, you know, blocker of the worst. And so it was really a great conversation. The state of emergency that we were under for COVID, 419 days.
Yeah, it was something like that. It was a long time.
419 days, which means that you had pretty much round the clock people keeping an eye on those numbers, understanding where the resources are. Still. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, I thought that was really awesome, because they kept saying things that I was like, oh, I never thought of that. I never thought of that, you know, and so they're thinking of it all.
They are, and we're going to continue to have information for you all when information comes from them. We have like a direct line about if there's a storm coming, and making sure that we get where the shelters are, which ones are pet friendly, which ones are accessible, which ones are for special needs. There's a lot that goes into them logisticizing that, and they don't do it until they are absolutely in the position that they have to, because of course, you know, transportation options can change. The way that supplies are coming in can change. So they don't have standard set shelter locations for a hurricane season. Yeah. Those decisions are made based on whatever the emergency is that they're facing.
Yeah. Last thing, in terms of an emergency, everybody needs access to food, right? So you actually did a tour of Second Harvest, which I thought was really awesome.
Oh, it was so great. And I really appreciate them giving us their time and the energy and the enthusiasm to get sort of the lay of the land and the understanding of how the county plays a role in them being a partner in our social safety net, in understanding that hunger is an issue across our country, across our county.
Yep.
I think people always think District 1 is big bucks, District 1, but there's hunger, there's, you know, we have as many needs as every other district. It's just sometimes they're a little more hidden.
Yep.
And so I think, you know, hearing from them about how they get their supply line and then how they get that inventory out to the greatest need, and seeing where there are opportunities for the future and where there are things that they went through in the last year that they are now taking with them to the next level, really, in understanding the silver lining of the horrible last year was some of these lessons about how we can better get to the people who need it the most.
Yeah. Ernest, do we have any questions? Well, I'll tell you one thing. It does make me feel good. I love the people over at Second Harvest. I know them all. It makes me feel really good to know that there's 600,000 people right now who are hungry, right? And the team at Second Harvest are not just trying to fill pantries, but they're also doing workforce development.
Oh, it was amazing.
They're collaborating with schools.
My mouth was watering in their culinary. They have a culinary training site and program going on, and going in there, and they were tabling all these desserts to go out, and it just looked amazing. And those were, they don't just train them there and certify, they also place into employment. The idea, they actually have a space there that you can use for events, and then they fully cater it with the team that's training in their culinary.
Beautiful.
So it's really an amazing place. I encourage you to take a stop there, check it out, see if you're looking for volunteer hours. I know they're always looking for people, and that's a blast. If you've ever worked back there, I'd never seen the front of the house. The back of the house is a hustle and bustle, man. They are sorting and they are putting orders together to go out to partner nonprofits and community centers and neighborhoods, and so it's an amazing operation.
Awesome. Well, that's it for Friday. Do you have any fun plans this weekend?
You know what? I hadn't even thought about it. This has been like one of these whirlwind weeks. So I was like, but I'm sure that there's going to be some, hopefully, catching up on friends that I haven't talked to, family I haven't talked to, because it's been such a busy week. And then, of course, laundry. Woohoo! This time of year.
Well, have fun doing laundry, everyone. And we will tune in next Friday. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.
Have a good weekend.